Hello, I'm Rachel from Douentza Garden in Ireland, and today I just wanted to make a very quick video telling you all about one of my favourite small trees, and it's a hawthorn tree. So while I was showing and telling you about it, I thought I'd just give you a little taste of the Irish folklore that surrounds the hawthorn tree. So first off, you're very welcome to this video, and some of you may have seen my previous video on my top 10 trees for a small garden, which I'll link to at the very end. But one of the trees that I didn't mention in that video, because I had no decent footage of it at the time, was this fantastic hawthorn tree. Now this gorgeous tree is a hawthorn, a cultivar called Crimson Cloud, and I absolutely love it. It is a small tree with a distinctive trunk that can be made even more distinctive by just removing a few lower branches as needed. And the great thing is that when it flowers, which is in kind of like late May or early June, it is absolutely spectacular. And it produces loads and loads and loads of very small, well, the very small flowers that any hawthorn tree produces. But these ones, instead of being white or pale pink, they are red with a white centre. And from a distance, it just makes a most amazing sight. You'd almost think it was a tree covered in climbing roses. But when you look really close up at those distinctive little flowers, they really are doty and gorgeous. Really special little thing. And if we look closely at my hawthorn Crimson Cloud, you'll notice that there is a regular hawthorn tree planted behind it. And that's because behind it we have the native hedge that the farmer behind me put in, and the hawthorn tree was regularly used in that because it has thorns that are very good at keeping animals in and keeping other animals out. So this hawthorn tree behind it is a result of that hedge, and it has grown and is really quite beautiful in its own right. But here we can see the two of them together. So the red one, which is the cultivar, the one I planted in my garden, and the one that is just there almost naturally. And in many countries, the hawthorn tree has a long history surrounded by superstition and stories. So Ireland isn't the only one in that respect. But in Ireland, the hawthorn tree is very closely associated with the fairies. Now, I just want to prefix all this by saying that Disney has very much kidnapped the whole idea of fairies, and fairies are generally thought of as benevolent, small, cute creatures that would do you no harm. But that is not the Irish fairy. The Irish fairy is a malevolent creature or set of creatures that will curse a family, that will destroy a crop, or that will steal your children. And there's a long folklore of fairies stealing children, especially ones that were particularly bright, particularly beautiful, and replacing them with the fairy's own suboptimal child. And this is called a changeling. So when a fairy exchanges a person with a fairy child in the human world, that person is called a changeling. And according to tradition, this was done for adults as well. Now, the hawthorn tree is very closely associated with the fairies, especially ones that seeded naturally in the middle of fields or in the middle of fairy forts, and farmers would never touch them because there was a lot of superstition about damaging the fairy tree, because the fairies would take their revenge, and their revenge would not be good. So the tradition has it that the fairies would gather around the hawthorn tree in the middle of a field at night and play music and try to lure in children to take them away to the fairy world. It wasn't only children. The fairies were supposed to have kidnapped. They were also supposed to have kidnapped adults too. And in fact, I suppose, reading between the lines, it was a convenient way for people to get rid of handicapped children or children that were sickly, or adults that were sickly. And the most recent instance of someone being burned for being a fairy was in 1895 with a very famous case of a woman called Bridget Cleary, whose husband and father decided that she was in fact a changeling. She was in the fairy world, and the woman in front of them, who was quite sick at this stage, was in fact a fairy put in their place. So they decided what they would do would be to burn her to death, and they burnt her to death. And the following day they were found in a field waiting for the real Bridget Cleary to return on a white horse from the land of the fairies. So very grim stuff, and a very strong association with the hawthorn tree being seen as a portal to the fairy world. However, we don't believe in that kind of stuff anymore, and the hawthorn tree is a beautiful thing with its masses of white flowers in May or early June, and sometimes tinged with pink. You can see it in many of the hedgerows along the roads in Ireland, and at the edge of people's gardens as well. Okay, that's all for the moment, but I would encourage you to look up Crimson Cloud, which is this particular cultivar that I grow. A very easy, no-nonsense tree that grows well, a small tree. The only maintenance I've had to do is to remove a few lower branches just to give it a more distinctive trunk. And when it's in flower, oh yes, it's absolutely gorgeous. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Bye!